Hello, if you've been here before, welcome back. If not, hi, my name is David. I make videos talking about media that I want to talk about. This is my monthly reading wrap-up of the month of March. It's been a long month. I read 11 books, and so I'm going to talk about them. I'm joined here today by Trixie, the Triceratops, and Xiaomei, the panda, reference to Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood, the little kitten thing that's on Mei Ling's shoulder all the time. I'm addressing an elephant in the room. I hurt myself on my bike. My right hand's worse. So if you see it, don't mention it. I don't know. This one's not as bad, which is good. I used to have both of them wrapped. Just this one has just a band-aid on it. Anyways, as usual, I have split up the recordings in half of the month. So we're gonna go to the past, who has no idea what's gonna happen in the future. We'll get to him now. Okay, I've had a pretty prolific reading month so far, so I'm going to try to go a little bit faster than usual. Also, because my phone is at half battery, so we'll see. The first book that I read in the month of, what is this, March now, is The Henna Artist by Alka Joshi. This I gave a 4.75 out of 5. It was so close to being a 5 out of 5 stars. And this is about a henna artist, Lakshmi, who moves to the city of Jaipur to escape her abusive husband. She moved there when she was 17, and she becomes a henna artist. But not only that, she's also, through her husband's mother, her mother-in-law, was really nice to her. She was really good friends with her before she had to leave, taught her about herbal medicines and herbal remedies. And so while she's doing henna in Jaipur, she's also giving herbal medicines and helping women stay not pregnant, removing pregnancies, ensuring pregnancies, sicknesses, happiness, sadness, stuff like that. So she's working with the high middle class, almost up to the high class people in Jaipur, hoping to, make a business doing these services. This is set like post 1950s, which is post India becoming independent. So it's during that time. I think it was a really interesting setting. I had read this book because I read Alka Joshi's book from Book of the Month. I'm off screen now. I'm so sorry. 6 Days in Bombay, which is one of the best books that I read last year. And so I saw this book on sale at like a used bookstore, and I was like, sure, I know the author, let me buy it. And I read it, and I was like, this is so good, because Lakshmi is using her knowledge of herbal remedies to help people around her and using those connections to advance herself. And so it was really fun watching her not manipulate, but definitely like use these connections to get ahead. And then things started happening, problems started occurring when her sister that she did not know that she had, she left like less than a year before her mother gave birth to her sister. She has her sister now living with her because her parents are dead, and her sister's very different than how she is. She's very, there's characters who appear section, which is really fun. I have to remind myself of her name. Radha. Radha is a really strong-willed character, very different than Lakshmi, a good foil, I would say, perhaps, but definitely like, a young girl who's trying to learn who she is and how the world is, at the same time that Lakshmi is trying to be perfect, trying to be this businesswoman. And so there's clashes that happen. And so I was really enjoying her having Lakshmi having to deal with her machinations along with Radha and trying to raise her and stuff like that. And she from the beginning, she was like, I'm not a parent, I don't know how to raise her, but I'm going to try my best. And seeing her struggle and try her best and have some successes and some failures really drew me towards Lakshmi, and I really liked that. Towards the middle, it became somewhat predictable. Oh, there's the word. I have my notes. Intrigue. There's a lot of intrigue. There's interconnected character relationships that was really fun to see as we go through. And towards the middle, there's still really interesting intrigue and interconnections, but some of it becomes very predictable. There were some parts that were surprising, but other parts I was like, this is very common plot devices, and I was not surprised when different things started happening, specifically surrounding Radha. And so I was like, I wish there was something more innovative with how things were moving in the plot. And then the ending, I didn't not enjoy it, but definitely didn't like how it was compared to the beginning. But overall, it was such an amazing book, and I know that it's a trilogy. I think I have the third book somewhere. Yes, the second book. Sorry, The Secret Keeper of Jaipur, which is the second book of this series, which is following Radha as a no Radha is followed in the third book. The second book is following Lakshmi's assistant Malik, and then right and his family. Yeah, Malik, her protege Malik, to return at the Jaipur palace in a tale rich in character, atmosphere, intrigue, and lavish storytelling. And so I didn't expect. I thought it was going to just continue with Lakshmi, but it does continue with the other part of her intrigue, which is her assistant Malik. Malik was a really great character here as well, and so I'll be reading the second book. I'm still seeing if I want to continue it monthly and finish the trilogy within the year, or just let it happen with others. I'll see what I feel like. But anyways, I was really happy with this book, and probably the best book that I've read. No, not the best book I've read so far, but definitely like up there. You know, I have all my books over here off screen. So that's why I'm looking over there. The next book that I read was Night Film by Marisha Pessl. I read this book because Jen over at Literary Love 123 made a video about this book, about why you should read it, and I was really interested in it, and so I'll link her video in the description below, and tag her as well. Thank you so much, Jen, for showing me this book, because I really liked it. It is a 4.5 out of 5 for me. It is about a journalist, Scott McGrath, who is investigating the suspicious death of Ashley Cordova, who is the daughter of a reclusive horror director who directed, I think it was 15 movies, and then stopped and then disappeared. And her death, which is ruled a suicide, he sees it as sort of suspicious, because he had tried before to figure out if Cordova, her father, was doing something evil, malicious, bad. But because of that, he couldn't find anything, and his career was tanked. It was a big scandal. And so now he wants to figure out if Ashley's suicide is related to anything bad that Cordova was doing. And so he's investigating this, and I came in with expectations that were not met, but then what was there was really good. Eventually, Scott encounters two other kids who was 24 and 19 years old. He's like 30 odd. And they want to help investigate, because they're connected in different ways to Ashley. We have Hopper, who is befriended Ashley when she was in rehab, and then Nora, who is an actress and learned a lot about Cordova. And so they're investigating this. I said it was 4.5 out of 5. It was a great mystery and slow burn. It didn't drag, but definitely there was a lot that was going on. But it was very well paced and set up, and so every investigation, everything that we learned led to something or another, and there was nothing that made it feel like it was dragging. It was not. It was really well paced, slow, and then in my opinion, McGrath is not a great protagonist. He didn't feel like any sort of thing. I only liked him when he was interacting with his daughter. He's divorced at this point, and so he's trying to co-parent with his wife or ex-wife, who's already married somebody else, and their daughter, who's was like she's a 8, I think. I forget how old she was. She's a young child, and so I only really liked him when he was interacting with his daughter, and then the investigations itself were pretty interesting, pretty fine. There is a really amazing section when they go into the peak, which is Cordova's reclusive, seclusive house mansion where he filmed all of his movies, and that section was absolute perfection. And then the rest of it was kind of fine, good. It was fine. It was good. I didn't hate it. I didn't love it, but definitely that one section made up a vast majority of my enjoyment for this film because it was a good setup towards that. There's great moments of ambiguity, great moments of small snippets of horror as well. Really good. But like, I think that Scott, he's not an amazing character. Nora and Hopper were much more interesting than him. And yeah, I just didn't quite enjoy him personally. And the ending was pretty ambiguous in a really interesting way and really good way. And so I definitely enjoyed myself reading this. So it's a 4.5 out of 5. I didn't realize how many almost good books I've read so far. The next book I read was Among the Barons by Margaret Peterson Haddix, which is book 4 of the Shadow Children series. I've read the first 3 books. I've already talked about those. They go, I think, oh my god, I think it was the 4.5, a 4, a 2 point something for the third book. This one's a 4.5. This was almost really good. And I think this book suffered from its limitations of it being a children's book. Coming off of the second book, not so much the third book, because the third book is covering Nina, some other character. But we're back with Luke/Lee, who took the name of Lee, who is some rich guy who died, and his family gave him his fake identity so that he can no longer be hidden, because Luke is a third child, a shadow child. Shadow children in this future in America, if you cannot have more than 2 children. If you have more than 2 children, you are illegal and evil and bad in the eyes of the government, obviously. And so Luke is a third child, and he's finally been able to be free. He's in this boarding school. He has the name of Lee Grant. All of a sudden, in his boarding school, Lee Grant's younger brother, Smits, it's not Smith, because it's Smithson, something like that, Smits comes to the school. And so we have this intrigue happening now where he's dealing with the barons, because Smits and Lee's parents are barons, the rich people in the world who aren't affected by the government's policies so much as the other people in the world. They're I get like the capital citizens, other dystopia citizens that don't get affected by dystopia, the erudite, the pretties, in the Uglies series. I only read the first book. Like I said, I think it suffered from it being so small. I think it needed a lot more space to deal with the barons and the rebellion and stuff, because I feel like there is so much nuance that could be applied here. I think this was tapping into some realized potential of this series, of this world building, and I think this is the best book so far of this series. Also juxtaposed with how bad the third book was, in my opinion. I really enjoyed dealing with the barons and dealing with this interplay of like the rebellion, and this person might not be a rebel, this might actually be a baron. There's multiple identities and multiple agendas going to and fro. I think the ending just was too quick for all of those agendas to be wrapped up, and I know that eventually it'll like pan out in the further series, but I know that the next book is not covering this aspect, and so I was just not. I wanted more. I wanted more from this book, and it is just a children's book. It's less than 200 pages, and so I really wanted more. I really liked Smits. I thought that he was going to be a very stock kind of character, a very archetypical kind of character, but he was very layered, much as Luke is, much as most of these characters are very layered, which I really liked. It's really good to have this type of character for children to read, because this is a children's story, children's series. And yeah, it just needs to be longer. It just needs to be longer. The next book that I'm reading, that I read, is Pole Position, Rebecca J. Caffrey, which was a book that I had read for a book club. It's definitely pulling from the same traditions as the popular series right now, Heated Rivalry. Instead of it being homoerotica in ice hockey, it's homoerotica in F1, Ford F-150. That's not it. What's F1 stand for?
Formula One.
Formula One. Jesus Christ. Whatever. It's gays in racing. It was a 4 out of 5. I think it deserves a lower ranking, but the experience of reading it was pretty good. I think that the characters, Kian and Harper, are I kept getting confused in my mind. It's because here we have Harper, and then in Night Film we have Hopper. That's why I was like, why am I having issues trying to remember their names? Yeah, that's why. Anyways, it was, it's about Kian, who is an established 34-year-old F1 racer, and then Harper, who is a rookie 24-year-old racer who replaces his Kian's racing partner when he gets in an accident. And so now they're both there, and they both have the hots for each other from the beginning. But Kian sees Harper as a reckless, not what's the opposite of antisocial, pro-social. He's very out there, very outspoken, extroverted, and Harper sees Kian as stuck up and sort of selfish and boring. But he's so hot. Oh my god, he's so hot. And yeah, it was a romance. I don't read romances that much. I read this for a book club, and I think, there's barely any plot. But the interesting part is that the relationship was really interesting. I was reading this and probably like a third in, I was like, this is a really great study in character dynamics and character relationships. And so I was like, you know what? I'm going to focus on this more as a study on character relationships than a story with a plot, because there isn't that much of a plot beyond just the continuation of the F1 race and like the development of the relationship. A lot of the actions the characters do here are really, really annoying. However, they feel very, very human. Like I've met so many gay men who act exactly like Harper and Kian, mainly Harper and his self-destructive tendencies. I've met so many men just like him, and it felt so natural. It was still annoying, and it was used in very annoying ways in the book, but it felt very realistic, and so I had to give it props there for that. Also, this is just a me thing. I am used to seeing. So this book is written by a British author who's Canadian now, and so in quotations, it was just the one mark for the quotation mark, right? I got used to seeing those in classical books because classical books tended to be British. And so I was reading and I was like seeing the one quotation mark thing, and I was like getting the feeling that I was reading a classic, but then they're like sucking dick and cock, and I was like, that's very different. So that was just a me thing. Also, there were some weird time jumps. Like they kept time jumping to different places with no consistency, and that kind of made it confusing at times. Overall, the experience was just better. What's the sum of the whole is greater than the sum of the parts, in my opinion. It probably deserves like a 3.5 or a 3, but I had fun. I had fun, and I don't tend to have fun with books like this. However, I will say, as I was reading it, I did feel like, you know what, I would have a better time reading The Charm Offensive by Alison Cochrane, which I read last year, 2 years ago. I read 2 years ago, and I was like, I prefer to be reading this book than Pole Position. So this book has a sequel. It is coming out sometime in this year. It is not out yet. I will buy it. I won't read it soon, but I'll buy it. And it's a continuation. It's like based off of the best friend of Harper. It's called First to Finish. So it's also a gay homoerotica, and I'm kind of excited because it's a different dynamic, because it's apparently in Ford not Ford what F1 racing. the racers have like an engineer in their ear that tell them about stuff like, oh, you're in this position, you're in that position. And in this book, it's, you know, the two racers are in love. But in the next book, it's the racer and his engineer in his ear. So I'm like, oh my god, this is going to be very malevolent, very Arthur John, a guy in his ear whispering to him, you know. I don't know. We'll see how it is. I'll talk about it eventually. The next book that I read in the month of March is a continuation of me attempting to clean through my shelves, because I have books on my shelves that I've had since like late high school, early college. I do not remember well because I was going through stuff. Anyways, last month I had read Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks. I'm keeping that book. The month prior to that, I had read Hot Dog Girl by Jennifer Dugan. Not keeping that anymore. YA. This is another book that I'm not going to keep because it's YA, and it's This Time Will Be Different by Misa Sigura. This is about CJ, who is third or fourth generation Japanese immigrant in high school in San Francisco. Actually, no, it's not San Francisco, is it? Northern California. Is that San Francisco? I forget. In Northern California, I forget exactly where it is. I kept thinking it was San Francisco, but it's probably not. I don't know. Anyways, Northern California. And she's working in a flower shop that's been in her family for generations. And her mother is working as a venture capitalist with a enemy family, the McAllisters. They're enemies with the McAllisters because the McAllisters are this rich white family that during Japanese internment bought this business, the flower business, for 10% of what it was worth, so that they wouldn't lose the business, but you know, they had to sell it anyways because their family had to go into the Japanese internment camps during World War II. After that, after they were freed, their family earned enough money to be able to buy the business back. Because of that, they hate this family, and so CJ thinks that her mother is betraying the family legacy by working for the enemy. At the same time, the flower flower business that she's working in is failing, that she's working with her aunt is failing. And so she's trying to figure out a way how to save the business. We're going to put on the best goddamn play to save the community center type story. And I think that's a fine story to talk about. As they're going through, eventually the conflict becomes, we learn that the McAllisters had bought land from Japanese farmers during Japanese internment for pennies on the what's the term? Pennies on the dime? For much less than it's worth, including the farmland that would eventually be donated to become the high school that she's studying in. And so they want to change the name of the high school from McAllister High School to Motohara High School, which is the farmer that owned the land before. And so there's like the political workings of that. And I think that would have been really interesting. However, at the same time, because it's YA, it's bogged down by petty romance shit, petty drama between high schoolers and shit that I don't fucking care about at this point in my life. Did I say the ranking? It's 3.25 out of 5. I think that it could have been so much better if it just stuck to it dealing with like the race and ethnicity issues, changing the name and stuff like that. But it just got bogged super down by high school petty romance bullshit. And I was not a fan of that at all. There's one character that is telegraphed from the very beginning that she's going to be with him from the very beginning. And I was like, there's no surprise. There's no surprise. We know that she's going to get with Owen, even though she's from the beginning. She's like, oh, have a crush on Shane. You know, it's important to read about for you as a young adult, but I am no longer a young adult. So I don't care about this anymore. I did really enjoy. So in she is in a flower shop, we get a lot about flower symbolism and how she uses these flower symbolisms to support herself, to help people, to sell flowers and stuff like that. And so there's aspects where she, you know, mentions that she gave this person this type of flower to promote this type of emotion, stuff like that. And she's like really good at that because she's also dealing with insecurity because her mother wants her to be passionate, be good about something, but she's never been able to accomplish that. So she thinks that she's a failure to her mother, who's like this super successful businesswoman, etc. And so all of that is really good, but then it's just bogged down by the romance. Why romance aspect? I will say, however, this is a me thing. It would have been really cool if there was some sort of like magical realism thing with the flowers and the flower symbolism, but that may have been just a different type of story for me to read. But I've had this book since in the inside you can see here there's like a note written by someone else. It's a note from Bruce to Jordan, dated February 2020, which means I probably got it around that time. Can you focus? Can you focus? You will not focus. Whatever. So I probably have had it, and that's like early college, and I do not remember reading this book beyond just like a few scenes. And yeah, I'm not keeping this book. I'm gonna give it away because I don't need it anymore on my shelves. It was also on the edge of the shelf, and there's like a opening in the shelf, so you would always just see her looking at you through the shelves. You see how like there's a little like space here? She was poking out, and I don't need that anymore. The next book that I read, The Traitor by Cormorant by Seth Dickinson. This is a reread. I read this book in 2023. It is a trilogy. I gave it a 4.5 out of 5, and it's about Baru Cormorant, who is a traitor, who she has 3 parents, two fathers, 1 mother. One of her fathers is killed by this colonizing empire, the Masquerade. And this is the Masquerade series as well. It's the first book in the Masquerade series because she's dealing with the empire of the Masquerade. And her father is killed by them, and she wants to tear them down. So what she does is she learns and studies and becomes a savant, a math savant, and she's going to work to tear down the empire from the inside. But before she's able to do that, they assign her to stop a rebellion in Ardwin, which is a colony in the north that she's not from. This is the map. So she has to figure out how to stop this rebellion, and then eventually figure out, actually, I can't do any of that, so I'm just going to help the rebellion stop the Masquerade. And so it's her dealing with this rebellion and like political machinations and intrigue. There's a lot of intrigue this month. I really loved this book the second time around. The first time around, I liked it. I didn't quite understand it. I probably understood 50%. This time I understood maybe 75 to 80% of it. There were some things that were still just a bit too complicated for me to fully grasp what the fuck was happening. But knowing that there is a twist at the end, I'm not going to reveal what the twist is. I will have to eventually when I talk about the second book. Whatever. It's really good. It's a lot. It's really intense, and Baru is such a great protagonist. You really feel for her, and you really root for her to accomplish the goals that she wants, especially because she's so devout in how she is learning and how she's growing. Intrigue was amazing. Dealing with the different dukes was really fun. I think it did an interesting thing that I saw in Sunrise on the Reaping, because when you have a huge cast of characters, you have to make each individual character feel individual. But how do you do that when you're juggling so many characters? You put them in little factions, and they did that in Sunrise on the Reaping. We had the newcomers and the careers. Here, the dukes were split into pairs or trios that made it much easier to keep track of who is where and what. And so, because there's a big fear that like you're going to lose track of all these characters, but this book did a really good job in making sure that you do not lose track by making them have pairs and groups, and then like individual one or two over here that are like stand out for a specific reason. So I think that was a really good job. I know it's only the beginning of this trilogy, but I can feel it like towing at the edge of like amazing. And it was just because there were some moments that were like a little confusing that sort of brought it back down for me to being like a 5 out of 5. but I had rated it before, I believe, out of 4 out of 5. It's 4.5 now, and I think that it's just really well written. The prose is really interesting and complicated, but not hard to read, and I was really happy with how it went. And so I'm reading this series bi-monthly on the off months that I'm also reading the Poppy War series, because I'm reading the Poppy War as a read-along book club online, and I talked about that last month. So next month I'll be reading the second book of the Poppy War. The month after that, I'll be reading The Monster by Cormorant, which is the second book of this trilogy. And I will say, I feel like I am enjoying this series more than the Poppy War, unfortunately, because I think this book is accomplishing the things that Poppy War wanted to accomplish better. But we'll see as both series continue how they stack up against each other. You know what I mean? Next, the last book that I'm going to talk about in this section, the most recent book that I finished, was Inkspell by Cornelia Funke. I have started the, this was last year when I had like four books that I had ordered from the library come in at the same time, so I had to quickly read through them, and they were all the first book of a trilogy that of books that I wanted to reread since my childhood. Inkspell, so I wanted to do Inkheart, and then the next, I'll talk about those one day. I eventually get to. Anyways, Inkspell is the second book of the Inkheart trilogy. I gave this a 3.75 out of 5. In comparison, Inkheart was just a 4 out of 5. I think this book is really good. It's good. I would see it as like, Inkheart is its own story, and then Inkspell, Ink Death, the second and third books, are its own story, because there is about like a year in difference between both books, between Inkheart and this part. I don't know if there's any difference in time between Inkspell and Ink Death, but I'll eventually get to that next month. But this is following Mo and Meggie, who after a year of the events in Inkheart are trying to rebuild their life with Risa, her mother, who is back from being captured, and all of a sudden Dustfinger, who is a character from Inkheart that was pulled out of Inkheart by Mo, finds a way to return to the Ink world and into the book. But then other enemies start appearing that they were not able to deal with prior, Basta and Mortola. And then there's also this other silver tongue guy, Orpheus, who's there, who's annoying. And they all eventually end up going to the Ink world and dealing with the issues there. And so it becomes in Inkheart, it was a fantasy about books and characters coming from those books and stuff like that. And it becomes, in this book, going to this fictional world and it just being a fantasy political thing happening. It's not even that political either. It's just like a fantasy dealing with like kings and stuff. And I think it had the same issues and benefits from Inkheart, but just a little bit more issues than it. The main antagonist, the Adderhead, I didn't enjoy. He just feels like generic bad guy. And Mortola is a much more interesting antagonist, and I much prefer her to the Adderhead. Meggie and Finoglio were characters that took a hit for me because they both complained a lot and were not that interesting and that good here. And there's a lot of fun magic. There's a lot of uses of reading to using the silver tongue magic. In Inkheart, I really wanted more of it to be used to pull things out, pull characters out from books and stuff. And here it's used a lot to affect change, and I like that a lot because that feels a lot more unique to this type of story. But I feel like the limitation of, oh my god, Finoglio can't think of words to write was stupid. And I feel like it was set up in the first book and it was set up at the beginning of this book that Meggie wants to write. And I think, if I remember correctly, she does write stuff in the third book that she can then read, but I feel like it'd be a lot more interesting in here if she begins to attempt to write. Because at the very beginning, she's like wanting to write a story, but just after a while can't continue it. And I'm like, that doesn't feel that exciting. I want her to learn and grow with her because she just feels limited to whatever Finoglio writes. And I don't care about Finoglio, so I don't care about Maggie now because she's not barely doing anything unless she has some page in front of her to read. And I feel like she would have a lot more, what's the term? More things to do if she was a writer as well, or learning how to write and stuff like that. Ferret and Dustfinger were pretty good characters. Risa, her mother needed more characterization, but that's just a consequence of her not being able to do much in general in the first and second books. And my biggest issue that the beginning and like towards the middle were really good, really fun, really well paced. That ending slog. It was in such a it drew out so long, and I was reading. I was like, why do we have like 200 pages left, and we're already close to like the very end? Everything was dragged on so much, and the pacing was so slow towards the end that I did not enjoy it. It was a slog to get through, and I did not like how the ending moved. It was just so slow. I did not enjoy that whatsoever. It could have been a 4 if that ending was not that slow. But for now, it's a 3.75. And because of this, honestly, I am sort of debating whether I really want to read Ink Death or not. I will, because I know I can finish it quickly depending how it is. I remember Ink Death being really good, but also I felt like I really liked Inkspell when I first read it, but this time around, not really. So I don't know what to expect. Inkheart was really good. So I don't know. I don't know what to expect, but I will be reading that next month. That is it for the first half of the month. This will probably disappear by the end. Back to you, to David in the future. All right, I'm back in the future. Have I healed yet? No. The next book that I read was Serpent's Shadow, which is the third book in the Kane Chronicles series by Riordan. Finally finished this trilogy, and this is the conclusion of the Kane Chronicles with Carter and Sadie trying to stop Apophis, I believe that's how you pronounce it, the Chaos Serpent. And it's a 4 out of 5. I think that this trilogy, I would say as a whole, was not as successful as I thought it was going to be, as I remembered it. I definitely like this book better than the first 2 books. The actual side missions, like in these types of stories, there's always some side mission that I have to do to like build up towards the main big confrontation. The side missions here felt much more aligned with the entire story. It felt more smoother, and they weren't like detractions or deviations from the actual story, which I was like really enjoying. Everything flowed well, and the ending was really good as well. And I just thought that this was a marked improvement of the first and second books. There's not much. I mean, it's a 4 out of 5, so it's not like a big jump. And I'm like, yeah, this was a series that Riordan wrote. I can see why there is no attempt to make more Egyptian god stories, because it's Riordan. He's white, and it is a little weird that he's writing these characters and this culture. There is a short story in the copy that I had that I didn't read, but it was like there's a trilogy of short stories where Carter meets Percy Jackson in the first one, and then Sadie meets Annabeth Chase in the second one. And in the third one, all 4 of them come together because at the end, or in this book, in Serpent's Shadow, there is a ghost character who's also like a magician who's trying to do something evil, and at the very end of it, his like little story plot wasn't wrapped up. So I was like, oh, was that an attempt to make a larger story with this main antagonist? But no, that was wrapped up in the short stories. And in that short story specifically, I skimmed through it. At the very end, I guess Annabeth controls Sadie's power for like a hot minute and is very powerful. And they're like, ooh, Egyptian and Greek magic is really dangerous. So we need to make sure that no demigods, no Greek demigods encounter Egyptian magicians, and vice versa, because that could be very dangerous. And that's why there's no crossover in the future. That's great. Fine. Okay. And yeah, I at least can say that I reread this series, and I can move on to the Heroes of Olympus series that I'm rereading. I already have like the last two books for some reason. I definitely like bought them as they were coming out when I was younger, but the first three books I do not have, so I'll buy them as well and have them on my shelf. Where is it? Oh, it's buried. I'm not going to pull it out. The next book that I read was the Book of the Month pick for March of 2026, which was This Story Might Save Your Life by Tiffany Crum. I gave this a 3.75 out of 5. It is about two podcasters, man and woman, who run a podcast called This Story Might Save Your Life. It's a comedy podcast where one of them presents a survival situation and the other one tries to solve their way out of it, and they make comedy out of it. And it's highly successful, have a bunch of followers, bunch of listeners. They're very famous because of their comedy podcast. But one night, all of a sudden, the woman of the podcast disappears along with her husband, who is also a producer. And the man has to pick up the pieces and try to figure out where she went, what happened. And also, we get interspersed snippets of a memoir that the woman was writing. And I say I really, really liked the first half of this book because it felt slightly different. Because we have this aspect of a podcast and like the comedy of it, and how the piece of media that is being presented is sort of gives it a tone, right? And then the disappearance of this woman. There's also some weird tension between her and her partner, or sorry, the other guy on the podcast. There's like a weird love triangle, love square thing happening as well. But overall, it felt very different. It felt like a very different type of thriller than I've read. And I was really excited about that because the disappearance didn't match up with anything we've seen in prior in terms of danger, right? And there was some mentions of like something happening that made her like agoraphobic. I believe that's what it's called when people are afraid to leave their house. So I thought that something interesting and unique was going to happen. But then Act 2 happened, which was actually not the halfway mark. The Act 2 occurs like a third of the way through, or 1/3 to finish, 2/3 of the way through. That's what I'm trying to say. It just became an unusual thriller about battered woman, abusive husband, kidnapping, etc. And I was like, this is not unique anymore, and this is boring, and I don't quite didn't enjoy that. The revelations were interesting, and I really liked them, but it was just a run-of-the-mill thriller that I did not want to read when I started reading about this podcasting, and I wanted some sort of like survivalist thing, like maybe she got lost, she got kidnapped or taken, or something along those lines. But it just became what I've seen before of, oh my god, my husband is abusive and I can't leave him because I put myself in a situation. And it's like, I want different types of thrillers than just that. And so I wasn't enjoying that. The next book that I read was Emily Wilde's Map of the Otherlands by Heather Fawcett. It's book 2 of the Emily Wilde's fairy series. It's just Emily Wilde series. There's no fairies in that, sorry. I gave this a 4.5 out of 5. It got so close to being really good. And my thing was, it's very similar to the first book in its structure, which I think brought it down just that 0.5. It could have been really good if it was trying to do something slightly different. And it did do something slightly different, but it still felt in structure and how the story was laid out. It felt very similar to the first book, which I still really enjoyed. Like, that's not a bad thing. It is just, it's not letting it be amazing. I really enjoyed that, like, in comparisons to the first book. The first book had more, like, cozy stuff, but this book had more plot stuff, and I really enjoyed the plot stuff more. Well, okay, the cozy stuff in the first book was really good, and surprisingly, and this book having more plot stuff than cozy stuff is a point towards it as well, and I guess makes the first book not as good in that light, but both are really good. I have to compare both of them anyways. I do think that there was too many characters that it kind of bogged down the story. All of the side characters had at least one or two moments that made them shine, but I feel like a lot of this could have been condensed down. The Dean, what's his name, Rose, well, him and Ariande, Emily's niece, were like good, but like I feel like they didn't reach any of the fullest potential that they could have. But then had some really good moments here and there. So it sort of balanced out in a weird way, I want to say. And I do want to say, I I wanted more romance. I wanted more romance between Emily and Wendell. I feel like I was missing some of that. I mean, yeah, they had a full like moment where they had sex in the woods, but like I feel I wanted more like romantic stuff happening between them. But I mean, there's enough here, but I want more because I feel like we could have had more. I'm holding out on my reservations for that for like the third book to see how that goes. But anyways, I thought this was a very successful book, and I really enjoy even from the first book. The second book continues it. I love the idea that study of fairies is a combination of actual structured scientific study combined with folk tales and English literature almost being used as evidence and references, and I really enjoyed that aspect. And I there was a point where I was like, Emily, I need you to do more of this study academic stuff. But towards the latter half, she begins using that, and it's so good. And the way that Emily is able to use her knowledge in sublime ways, both in the first book and the second book, is just really good. And so I just was really happy with how the second book came out, and so I'm looking forward to how the third book. I don't know, is it going to finish the series? I'm not fully sure. And the last book that I read in the month of March, just finished it today, is The Dark Forest by Cixin Liu, translated by Joel Martinson, which is the second book in the Remembrance of Earth's Past trilogy. The first book of which is The Three-Body Problem. I talked about that book a month ago, and I wanted to finish the series. This is the second book, and it is so good. It's a 5 out of 5. I will say it's a deceptive slow burn because there's stuff going on constantly, but the actual pinnacle of the story and how good it is comes at the very end and lasts like 100 or so pages, and so it feels at the end of it like it was a slow burn, but in the middle of it, it's very active. Does that make sense? I felt like I was climbing a mountain, and when I got to the peak, it was absolutely amazing. I cried at the end of this. It was so good. This is following up on the three-body problem, where Earth realizes, hey, there's aliens coming down in space. They're coming, but they're only arriving in 400 years. And so, which is a really interesting concept because usually we have these alien invasion stories of like, it's happening now, or we're going to go there, or something like that. But the vast span of time creates really interesting interactions in our world, in Earth, in preparation for the aliens that are coming in 400 years. It had some of the best sci-fi concepts I've ever seen. It's a concept that doesn't even need to be sci-fi, but the Wallfacer project, where the main plot of the story is revolving around 4 people that are chosen by the United Nations to make plans and strategize on how to defeat the Trisolarians, the aliens that are coming, because the Trisolarians are using Sophons, a multi-dimensional particle that can perceive everything except for human thought. And so these Wallfacers are specifically making these plans without telling anyone why they're making these plans. And so the story revolves around the 4 of them, mainly one of them, Luo Ji, who is just a random guy chosen to be a Wallfacer. Him and the other 4 all the 3 Wallfacers are trying to like do different things, do different agendas to stop the aliens or defeat the aliens that are coming in 400 years. And I thought, I mean, that doesn't have to be a sci-fi concept, but the way that it was used was really good. I love the Trisolarian technology that comes by, the droplet. It's terrifying. Love that. And the idea of the depiction of Earth's future in like 100, 200 years is so interesting. It's so good. I There is a lot of time jumps here and there, but those time jumps didn't feel jarring, and they were very smooth out, and it was really fun to see Shishinryu's interpretation of what the future might hold for humanity, in terms of there's also an alien force coming in 400 years. Because there's a question of like, how would Earth change in the future versus how would Earth change in the future knowing that there is an endpoint of aliens returning. My biggest issue with Three Body Problem, the first book, is that the characters felt one-dimensional and not well made, not well written. I think that in this book, the characters are still a little weak. The weakest aspect of this story for me is the characters, but they're getting better. I really like how Luoji develops. I did not like how he began, but I like how he develops. And the other characters around him, the other main characters, Dashi stays being iconic, so that's really fun. And definitely improves on the character writing from the first book. And yeah, it just had some amazing sci-fi concepts that are somewhat difficult to wrap one's head around. There are some things I just didn't quite understand exactly, but less things that I didn't understand than in Third Body Problem, which had more things I didn't understand. So I feel like I fully have understood on a good level this book compared to Third Body Problem, and I am totally looking forward to the third book to see how that goes as well. Honestly, high expectations. I'm saying this right now, this might be a curse. High expectations for the third book, considering how this book was. Don't know how the third book's going to be, but I'm definitely looking forward to it. And that is all the books that I read in the month of March. It's been a long month because I feel like it's been ages since I read the Henna Artist. This was a pretty good month, I will say. Henna Artist, Night Film, even Among the Barons was really good. And then the only like stinker really was This Time Will Be Different, because it's not for me anymore. Oh, and then Inkspell. I don't have that anymore because that's a library book, but Inkspell was also a slog to get through. Inkspell really made this reading month feel atrocious. But I'm still gonna finish the series. We'll see. I have somehow landed myself in a weird position of finishing just a bunch of series at the same time. And so I'm trying to finish series. I think after Ink Death, I'm not going to continue with rereading a handful of series that I read in the past, because I got so many books that I have to read now that I have physically. So I might just stop that, and then finishing these trilogies, continuing this trilogy, and then I got a book of the month to read at some point, and then the book club the book club book that I need to read for that month is what I'm trying to say. So that's just taking up a lot of time, but I'll get there. I think I've decided to not immediately continue the Henna Artist. I forget what the trilogy, the Jaipur trilogy. I'm not going to continue that immediately. I will definitely continue the series, but it's just not next month. I'll see when it is that I want to do that. And yeah, that is all the books that I read in the month of March. I think a pretty good month as well. If you've heard of any of these books, read any of these books, please let me know. And yeah, thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Share with your friends. Let me know what you think. Don't forget to be passionate, and I'll see you later.